President, later this week, I assume sometime tomorrow, the Senate is expected to vote on the Rebuild America Jobs Act. This is a practical, common-sense legislation that does two urgent and important things. It will help to modernize America's crumbling infrastructure, and it will help to put Americans back to work and get our economy going again. Not surprisingly, this bill enjoys overwhelming popular support among the American people. Every day, Americans see the infrastructure crisis with their own eyes. They see interstate highways increasingly overwhelmed, potholes everywhere. They see bridges and overpasses structurally unsound, in danger of collapse. Need I mention the gridlock in some of our major cities because of inadequate roadways and access points for automobiles? China and Brazil are building world-class seaports, while ours are left over from early in the last century. We know that we need to make major federal investments in modernizing America's infrastructure. So why not do it now, at a time when our nation is suffering from the most protracted period of joblessness since the Great Depression? The construction sector is the hardest hit part of our economy. We can put those people back to work, renewing our infrastructure, and again, as I said, boosting our economy. So why aren't we doing this? Well, the answer, Mr. President, is the Republicans have made it clear that they intend to block this legislation tomorrow, just as they have blocked so many other bills designed to put Americans back to work and get the economy moving again. They filibustered and killed the American Jobs Act. 2 weeks ago, they filibustered and killed the Teachers and First Responders Back to Work Act. Mr. President, it seems to me that if the word no were removed from the English language, our Republican friends would be rendered speechless. But let me state the obvious. The word no will not put 28 million Americans back to work. The word no will not allow us to strike a balanced agreement to bring deficits under control. The word no will not allow us to undertake a robust program to modernize our transportation system. Now, the job-creating investments in this bill are fully paid for with a tiny, fractional tax on the richest of the rich in the United States. These wealthy Americans would pay a 0.7%, that's 0.7% surtax on incomes in excess of $1 million a year. Let me repeat that. It would be this infrastructure jobs bill that we'll be voting on tomorrow, which the Republicans have indicated they're going to filibuster and kill. It's fully paid for with a 0.7% surtax on incomes in excess of $1 million a year. Now, if those making more than $1 million a year even noticed such a negligible tax, I would be astonished. But still, the Republicans say no. Now, let's put this in context. Just last week, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office reported that over the last 3 decades, the after-tax income of millionaires and billionaires increased by 275%. The Congressional Budget Office said over the last 3 decades, the after-tax income of millionaires and billionaires increased 275%. During the same 30 years, the same 3 decades, the average take-home pay of middle-class workers in America actually declined. Is it any wonder that the middle class is upset when they see what's happened to them over the last 30 years? Flat, slightly declined in terms of their living standards and their income. The super rich increased their take-home by 275%. The top 1% of income earners in America now take home more than half of all the money earned each year in America. Again, that needs repeating. The top 1% of income earners in America take home over half of all of the money earned in America every year. Mind-boggling, isn't it? Mind-boggling. And yet, Republicans adamantly oppose any tax increase on these people, even a 0.7%, which would go towards the infrastructure of America, putting people back to work. Certainly no one questions the solicitude of Republicans toward the rich and the super rich. I just wish they'd show even a fraction of that concern on behalf of the besieged middle class in this country. Republicans on this so-called super committee are willing to block all progress in order to prevent any tax increase at all on the rich. But they are demanding deep cuts to Social Security and Medicare, student loans, other federal programs that undergird the middle class in the United States. And meanwhile, Republicans there in the Senate continue to block the bills that we have proposed in order to put people back to work and get the economy moving again. Some pundits have speculated that for political reasons, Republicans are deliberately blocking any legislation that would boost the economy or create jobs, because that would make President Obama maybe look good. These pundits point out that the Senate's minority leader has been very explicit in stating that his number one priority is to prevent the re-election of President Obama. So many of the pundits say that to the extent that Republicans can prevent us from doing anything, keep this place in gridlock, keep us from having a jobs program, and the economy gets worse, well, then they'll say the American people, see, President Obama's not doing his job. The economy's getting worse. I just heard my colleague from Iowa. In his speech, he was honest enough to say that President Obama had inherited a bad economy, and that's true. He admitted that. My friend from Iowa, my colleague, went on to say, however, that President Obama has made it worse. Hasn't improved anything in the last 2.5 years. His plan hasn't worked. But I dare say it's been the Republicans who have been blocking anything that we could do to put America back to work, including their voting no tomorrow, which I understand they will, to prevent us from getting this jobs bill through tomorrow on our infrastructure. A more charitable explanation is that Republican ideology insists that government can't create jobs. This may be a sincere belief of most Republicans, but I must point out it is sincerely wrong. Across our nation's history, an often visionary federal government has funded and spearheaded initiatives that have expanded private commerce and given birth to countless inventions and new industries and created tens of millions of jobs in the process. So let's take a look at history. One of the most visionary advocates of federal investments to create jobs was, believe it or not, the father of the Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln. Despite the disruption of the Civil War, Lincoln insisted on moving the nation forward through bold federal investments and initiatives. For example, in 1862, he signed the Pacific Railway Act, authorizing huge federal land grants to finance construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, one of the great technological feats of the 19th century. To produce the rails for this railroad, he enacted a steep tariff on foreign steel in order to get the American steel industry going. There's a story, I don't know if it's real or apocryphal, about Abraham Lincoln. He was approached by, I guess, the free traders of his time and said, if you're going to build this transcontinental railroad, it would be cheaper to import the rails from England. They have the steel mills. They know how to do it. It would be cheaper to build them in England and ship them in here. It is said that Lincoln thought about this for some time, and he came back and he said, it seems to me, however, that if we buy the rails from England, then they've got our money and we've got the rails. But if we build the rails here, we have our money here and we have the rails. Now, like I said, I don't know if that story is true or not, but I've heard it many, many times in my lifetime. And thus, he put a steep tariff, kept England's rails out, rebuilt our steel industry, and as they say, the rest is history. These and other federal initiatives during Lincoln's presidency had a transformative impact on the U.S. economy, created new industries, created millions of jobs. And again, Lincoln did this despite the fact the federal government was deeply in debt, running huge deficits to finance the Civil War. It's almost humorous to imagine how today's Republicans would have reacted to Lincoln's agenda. No doubt they would have attacked him as reckless and irresponsible. They would whine that we're broke and can't afford to invest in the future. I keep hearing this all the time. We can't afford to do this. We can't afford to do this. We're broke. We're broke. Doesn't anybody understand we're broke? I keep pointing out the United States is the richest country in the history of mankind. The richest country in the history of mankind. We have the highest per capita income of any nation in the world. So if we're so rich, why are we so broke? I think we got to keep asking that question. I'm sure that the Tea Party contingent would have demanded that Lincoln be expelled from the party. All of which reminds us just how far the modern-day Republican Party has strayed from its progressive, forward-thinking beginnings. Indeed, the present-day Republican Party would have excoriated President Reagan. I see they just put a new 9-foot statue of him up out at National Airport. They should put underneath that he raised taxes in 1982, 1983, and 1984. Yes, President Reagan raised taxes 1982, 1983, and 1984. Dwight Eisenhower, another Republican, championed one of the greatest public works projects in our history, and that's the building of the interstate highway system. A 1996 study of the system concluded that the interstate highway system is an engine that has driven 40 years of unprecedented prosperity and positioning the United States to remain the world's preeminent power into the 21st century. And of course, Franklin Roosevelt, in the depths of the Depression, put a lot of people to work. And they built a lot of good things. And so I thought I would bring over here, this is, I hang this on the wall in my office. This is my father's, not my grandfather, okay? This is my father's WPA card. Now, for all you young people here, you can read your history. WPA stands for the Works Project Administration. It was instituted in the Depression to put people back to work building public works projects. And so this is my father's WPA card because he was out of work. And he went to work on WPA, and it's got his name here, Patrick F. Harkin, Cumming, Iowa. It says here, you're asked to report ready for work at once at a project as a laborer, $40.30 per month, 130 hours max, Warren County. Signed by my father. Now, so my father went to work on WPA. This is his card. I keep it as a reminder of a lot of things, but also a reminder of the good things that government can do. So they gave my father a job. He was married, had 5 kids, the 6th one on the way, me. No work, no income. Of course, that was before Social Security or Medicare or anything else. So, what did they do? They just stand around doing nothing? Years later, my father took me out to visit some of the projects that he worked on WPA. There's a place south of Des Moines called Lake Aquabi. Lake Aquabi, A-H-Q-U-A-B-I, Aquabi. It is a huge state park. It's a recreational facility, campgrounds, Boy Scouts, a big lake there, conference centers, still being used today, built by my father. Well, not by him alone, but he worked on it in the WPA, still being used today. You can go in and look at the high school, built by WPA, still being used today, I might add. So my father was rather proud of the things he worked on. Now, when they built the high school, did the government do it? Was it some kind of government entity that built it? No, it was a private contractor. Who dug out the lake and built the things at Lake Aquabi? Private contractors. And the bill that we're going to vote on tomorrow, the Public Works bill, the Putting America Back to Work jobs bill tomorrow, would put people all over America back to work on highways and bridges and sewer and water systems and things like that, that would be employed by the private sector, by private companies to do the work. And the work needs to be done. Many of the things that my father and others in WPA worked on in the 30s still are being used today, although they're crumbling. They're crumbling. Someone recently said that we are still driving on Eisenhower's highways and going to Roosevelt schools. So what is our generation going to do to rebuild that infrastructure for future generations? Well, I guess we're just going to sit around here and do nothing because the Republicans continue to filibuster and block any meaningful jobs bill from getting through the Senate.
Yield for a question as to how much more time the senator will be taking for the benefit so we can adjust.
I would say to my friend from Arizona, about less than 10 minutes.
I thank the senator.
7 minutes, maybe.
I thank the senator.
I thank Senator. So investments like these, investments like what Abraham Lincoln did or what Eisenhower did or Franklin Roosevelt did, investments that were led by Lyndon Baines Johnson to educate our workforce, to retrain our workforce, to make sure every child had a good education in America. All of these helped people who were unemployed, helped them get jobs, helped them to become taxpayers, and it set the stage for economic growth in our country. So, to me, the most obvious and quickest way to dramatically ramp up our federal investments in infrastructure is to pass this jobs bill. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that America faces a $2.2 trillion infrastructure backlog. Bringing the U.S. infrastructure into the 21st century would rapidly create millions of private sector jobs, especially in the hard-hit construction industry, while modernizing our arteries and veins of commerce. Mr. President, there can be no economic recovery without robust, forward-thinking investments to boost our competitiveness and put people back to work. This means to invest in education, innovation, the infrastructure in America. And it means restoring a level playing field with fair taxation, a good ladder of opportunity to give every American the education they need to gain decent employment and achieve the American dream. So again, it's all wrapped up in the Rebuild America Jobs Act that we'll be voting on here tomorrow. I wish I could say that I'm hopeful that we could pass it, but I understand the Republicans are going to filibuster it and we won't have the 60 votes needed. And that's just a shame because we need to put people back to work and we need to rebuild our infrastructure. And we can't wait much longer to do it. So, Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.